Well, thank you all so much for coming today. When I had the pleasure to be invited for this and saw the program, of course, I immediately started looking at the program to see who else was speaking at the same time as me. And I discovered that there are no fewer than 2 Pulitzer Prize winners, a major Hollywood actress. And so, I know my topic is losers, but, however, I take some pleasure, however, in speaking to you between 2 Pulitzer Prize winners, so you should certainly stay on for more in this tent. But most of all, thank you to the Library of Congress and to the organizers of this wonderful festival. I mean, how great is it to walk along here and see all this? Thomas Browne would always remember the day that the American Revolution changed his life. It was the summer of 1775, the 25-year-old's first on his own American land. He had arrived in the colonies a year earlier from the blustery English port of Whitby with 74 indentured servants in tow to start a plantation in the Georgia backcountry near Augusta. The newcomers must have marveled on reaching this strange subtropical landscape where giant black oaks stood like 60-foot columns holding up the sky. Within 9 months, Browne and his laborers had cut much of the forest into farms. He supervised a burgeoning 5,600-acre estate from a fine new great house, his tenants surrounding them, and 36 farmhouses of their own. Horses filled his stables, cattle and hogs got fat off his grass and feed. But another force was set to transform Thomas Browne's new world. He saw it coming one August day in the form of 130 armed men walking straight toward his house. Now, Browne knew before coming to America of the troubles that had been tearing up Anglo-American relations for at least a decade. A series of taxes imposed by Britain had triggered a heated series of conflicts over the limits of parliamentary authority and the rights of colonial British subjects. Browne confidently reckoned that Georgia, 1,000 miles away from New England, the center of unrest, had, quote, no connection or concern in such affairs. Even in 1774, investing his personal fortune and his future in the American colonies looked like a good bet. But in April 1775, British and American troops exchanged the first shots of the revolution outside Boston, and no part of the colonies remained unconcerned for long. In Savannah and Charleston, the nearest major cities to Browne's estate, patriots formed associations to organize support for the rebellion and approached Browne and his neighbors to join. Did he have anything to gain from joining this rebellion? Not really. The fact that he had recently arrived, and I should add, in 1775, 10% of the people living here in America had only just arrived from Britain. This mattered less to his calculations than that he intended to spend the rest of his life here. Whatever he may have thought of the principles at stake, self-interest alone pointed out Browne's choice. He refused patriot overtures and signed on to a loyalist counter-association instead. The next thing Browne knew, patriot invitations became demands, delivered by gangs like the one at his door. Standing on the porch, the sticky heat clinging to him like a second shirt, Browne tried to put the men off calmly. He had no wish to fight his own neighbors, he said, but he, quote, could never enter into an engagement to take up arms against the country which gave him being. The conversation quickly turned to confrontation. Some of the patriots, quote, threatened that unless he would subscribe to the association, they would drag him by force to Augusta. Browne backed into the house to seize his weapons, determined to defend himself as long as he was able against any violence. It would be at the peril of that man who should attempt it, he screamed, brandishing his pistols. 6 men lunged at him, blades flashed, a gun fired, a rifle butt swung up over his head, and then blackness. What came next he would reconstruct later, from flashes of recollection in a semi-conscious haze. Shattered head throbbing, body bleeding, he rattles over a track. They reach Augusta. He is tossed to the ground, his arms lashed around the trunk of a tree. He sees his bare legs splayed out in front of him, funny-looking foreign things, and he sees hot brown pitch poured over them, scalding, clinging to his skin. Under his feet, the men pile up kindling and set it alight. The flame catches the tar, sears his flesh. His feet are on fire, 2 of his toes charred into stubs. The attackers seize his broken head by the hair and pull it out in clumps. Knives take care of the rest, cutting off strips of scalp, making the blood run down over his ears, his face, his neck. Half scalped, skull fractured, lamed, slashed, and battered, Brown, remarkably, survives. Later, a doctor comes to the place where he is confined and bandages him up, setting his broken bones on course to heal. A sympathetic guard, moved by the spectacle of this badly damaged man, agrees to let Brown get away. He slips out of custody and rides over the border into South Carolina to take shelter with a Loyalist friend. Now, this may not sound like the American Revolution that you learned about in school. But today, I open with the story of Thomas Brown, one of the early episodes in my book, because I want to ask you to throw out that revolution that you learned about in school. Just sort of leave it aside, put it away out of your minds. And I want you to follow me instead through a looking glass to see the American Revolution from the other side. This is a side on which sticking to your beliefs, sticking to your loyal beliefs, loyalty, a quality that we value, mattered more than violently throwing them out on what seemed like a whim, where the losers, whom history has forgotten, actually become the central actors in the story, and where the story of America, the history of America, can unfold in the world beyond our shores. So the story I want to tell you today is about the American loyalists who left the United States to find new futures in the British Empire. Now, when talking about loyalists, the first thing that we need to realize is that a man like Thomas Brown was far from alone. Fully 1 in 3 members of the American population at the beginning of the Revolution remained loyal to Britain. It was the default choice. About 1/3 of colonists, meanwhile, didn't have much of an opinion. So at the beginning of the Revolution, patriots were in a minority. Theirs was the strange choice, the one that is difficult to understand. So we're talking about a large percentage of the American population. And what this meant is that the American Revolution was really our first civil war. This was a war that was divided communities. It divided friends. It divided families. Most famously, it divided our founding father, Benjamin Franklin, from his only son, William Franklin, who remained a loyalist. So this was a conflict that cut right through the center of American life, and it was routinely described as a civil war at the time. Who were these loyalists? Well, stereotypes still loom large when thinking about loyalists. We tend to think of them as being white, elite, men with strong ties to Britain, members typically of the Anglican Church. We think of them under the label Tory, which is a term meaning conservative in British political culture. Again, throw these stereotypes out along with your old images of the American Revolution. This was not the only profile of loyalists. Loyalism ranged right across the social, the ethnic, the geographic, the religious spectrum of early America. It included shoemakers and carpenters and bakers, cosmopolitan city dwellers, farmers on the frontier like Thomas Brown. And most of all, these loyalists were not even Tory in the sense of being conservative. In fact, many of them resisted the idea of paying taxes to Britain, and many of them wanted to see reform in the imperial relationship. Crucially, not all loyalists were white, another one of the stereotypes that we need to throw away. Loyalists included a number of Native American nations who saw better futures for themselves, better prospects for themselves under the government of the British Empire than they did at the hands of the white settlers who for so many decades had been trying to take their land. So the Creeks, the Mohawks, various Indian nations ally themselves with Britain. And loyalism also included a large number of Black Americans. Early in the Revolution, the British issued an amazing promise